What if everything you've been taught about being good, fair, and just is the very thing holding you back from real power? What if that moral compass you trust is actually a map leading to your own downfall? 500 years ago, a disgraced diplomat named Niccolò Machiavelli wrote a short, dangerous book. It was a manual so chillingly pragmatic, so divorced from traditional morality, that it was condemned by the church and gave us a new word for ruthless ambition, Machiavelli. He believed that to survive in the unforgiving arena of power, the first thing you have to learn is not to be good. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a masterclass in political survival. We're about to explore Machiavelli's The Prince to uncover the 5 timeless rules for seizing and holding on to power. These are the principles that separate the rulers from the ruled, the predators from the prey. So forget what you think you know about leadership. The game of power is played by a different set of rules. And today, you're going to learn them. Rule. Master Vert. Forge your own fortune. The first and most fundamental rule is to cultivate what Machiavelli called virtue. Now, don't confuse this with the English word virtue. They're not the same. In fact, they're often opposites. Moral virtue, kindness, honesty, piety was, in Machiavelli's eyes, a dangerous luxury for a leader. Virtù is something far more potent. It's a concept rooted in the Latin word for manliness and strength. It's a dynamic mix of ambition, audacity, cunning, courage, and ruthless effectiveness. It's the ability to impose your will on the world, to bend events to your favor, and to master the unpredictable tides of fortuna, or fortune. Machiavelli saw the world as a constant battle between virtù and fortuna. He imagined fortune as a raging river, capable of destroying everything in its path. A passive person, one who just hopes for the best, gets swept away. But a person of virtù doesn't wait for the flood. During quiet times, they build dams and channels. They prepare, they anticipate. So when the river of fortune inevitably rages, they aren't its victim. They're its master, redirecting its ferocious energy for their own ends. This is the core of the first rule. Real security comes from skill, not from luck. Anyone who inherits power or just stumbles into it is fundamentally weak, dependent on the same forces that can destroy them in an instant. A leader who relies on the goodwill of others or a lucky break has built their house on sand. They don't truly own their power. They're just borrowing it. Machiavelli makes a powerful point. Those who acquire a state through their own virtù have a hard time winning it, but an easy time holding it. The struggle is what forges their strength. To see work in action, Machiavelli points to Cesare Borgia, son of Pope Alexander VI. Borgia was a man of terrifying ambition and skill. He got his state in Italy through the good fortune of his father's position, but he didn't just sit back. He immediately used his own virtù to secure it. He knew that allies given by fortune aren't allies you can trust. So, he systematically and brutally eliminated the rival families who threatened him. In one famous move, he used a cruel lieutenant, Ramiro de Orco, to pacify the province, and then had the man's body cut in two and left in a public square. This single act, Machiavelli notes with cold admiration, left the people both satisfied and stupefied. It was a masterstroke of calculated crutia concept we'll come back to. Through his decisive actions, Borgia transformed a state handed to him by fortune into one held by his own power. But how do you apply this today, when public executions are generally frowned upon? The principle is the same. Don't wait for a promotion. Prove you're so indispensable that they have to give it to you. Don't rely on your business partner's loyalty. Structure your deals so their self-interest is tied directly to yours. Don't just hope for good market conditions. Build a business so resilient and innovative that it thrives in chaos while your competitors drown. Virtù is about taking action. It's the rejection of victimhood. The world isn't something that happens to you. It's something you shape. Machiavelli admits that fortune might control half of our actions, but he says it leaves the other half, or maybe a little less, for us to govern. The person of virtue grabs that half with both hands and wrings every last drop of advantage from it. They are proactive, not reactive. This is the first law of survival. Stop waiting for fortune to smile on you. Build your own throne. Your skill, your ambition, your Williovertach is the only currency of power that never loses its value. Rule to embrace pragmatic realism. See the world as it is. The second rule is the bedrock of Machiavelli's entire philosophy. You have to see the world as it actually is, not as you wish it were. This is a brutal, unsentimental realism that strips away every illusion about human nature. For Machiavelli, the biggest mistake a leader can make is to be an idealist in a world that isn't ideal. Trying to govern based on how people should act is a direct path to ruin, because the world is full of people who are not good. Machiavelli was obsessed with the effectual truth of things. He wasn't interested in imaginary utopias. He cared about the grimy, bloody, backstabbing reality of 16th century Italy. And in that reality, he saw one fundamental truth. Human beings are fickle, ungrateful, deceitful, and driven by self. They'll promise you anything when things are good, but they'll abandon you at the first sign of trouble. A leader who tries to be good all the time among so many who are not will inevitably be destroyed. This is a terrifying thought because it cuts against everything we're taught. We're told to be honest, compassionate, and to keep our promises. Machiavelli says a leader who always sticks to these virtues isn't being moral. He's being irresponsible. His personal goodness will lead to the state's destruction. And what good is a virtuous ruler of a kingdom in ashes? So, a leader who wants to stay in power, Machiavelli concludes, must learn how not to be good, and to use this knowledge or not, according to necessity. This brings us to one of his most infamous statements. It's much safer to be feared than to be loved, if you can't be both. Why? Because love, he says, is a bond of obligation that people, being selfish, will break whenever it benefits them. Love is fickle, but fear is held in place by a dread of punishment that never goes away. Think about it in practical terms. An employee who loves their charismatic boss might still jump to a competitor for a 10% raise. Their affection is conditional. But an employee who fears the consequences of missing a critical deadline is far more likely to get the job done. The fear of a negative outcome is a more reliable motivator than the promise of a good feeling. Steve Jobs is a classic modern example. He was known for his brutal honesty, his volcanic temper, and his relentless demand for perfection. Many people who worked for him were terrified. And yet, that fear pushed them to create revolutionary products that changed the world. Their fear of his disapproval was a more potent creative fuel than a gentler leader's encouragement could ever have been. Applying this rule today means doing a cold, hard audit of what really motivates people. When you're negotiating, don't rely on your counterpart's sense of fairness. Appeal to their greed and their fear of losing out. Structure the deal so it's more profitable for them to keep their word and more painful to break it. When you're managing a team, don't just assume they're driven by loyalty to the mission. Understand they're also driven by their own careers, their financial needs, and their desire to avoid failure. Your job is to align their self-interest with your goals. This realism extends to your image. Machiavelli advises that a leader should appear to be merciful, faithful, humane, and religious, but be mentally prepared to be the exact opposite when necessary. Perception is a tool. Morality can be a costume you wear when it's useful, but underneath, you must be ready to do what's required. Because your survival and the survival of your country, company, or career depends on it. This isn't a call to be a monster. It's a call to be a realist. The idealist enters the arena armed with a code of ethics. The Machiavellian enters armed with a deep, unforgiving understanding of human nature. Only one of them walks out. Rule 3. Wield cruelty and deceit with surgical precision. And that leads us to our third, and perhaps most jarring rule, the strategic use of cruelty and deceit. To us, this sounds like an endorsement of evil, but for Machiavelli, cruelty and deceit aren't about morality. They are instruments of power, like a hammer or a scalpel. The question isn't whether they're good or evil, but whether they're used effectively. Machiavelli makes a critical distinction between cruelty well used and badly used. Badly used cruelties are those that start small and grow over time constant, nagging acts of oppression that keep people in a state of permanent anxiety. This just breeds hatred, which is the one thing a ruler must avoid at all costs. Well-used cruelty is completely different. It means committing all your necessary acts of violence at once, right at the beginning. The shock is immense. The pain is sharp, but it's over quickly. The logic here is chillingly psychological. When the violence is swift and concentrated, people are stunned. Once it's over and the ruler starts providing benefits and stability, the memory of that initial shock begins to fade. The benefits, given out, little by little, taste even sweeter by comparison. A ruler who commits one great, terrible act to secure his power and then rules justly is far more secure than one who's constantly a petty tyrant. Look at his example of Agathocles, the Sicilian, a man who rose from humble origins to become king. He did it by calling a meeting of the city's senators and richest citizens, and then, on a signal, had his soldiers murder them all. In a single act of supreme treachery, he eliminated the entire ruling class. After that, Machiavelli notes, he ruled securely. His methods weren't virtuous, but they were undeniably effective. He consolidated his power in one bloody morning and was then free to govern. The modern version isn't about physical violence, but corporate brutality. Think of a CEO brought in to turn around a failing company. Badly used cruelty would be to do wave after wave of layoffs over several years, creating a culture of constant fear. Well-used cruelty, in a Machiavellian sense, is to make one single, deep, decisive cut right at the start, announce all the layoffs at once, restructure the entire company in one move. The blow is severe, but it happens one time. This allows the survivors to feel secure and focus on rebuilding, instead of constantly looking over their shoulders. Deceit, likewise, is a necessary weapon. A prince, Machiavelli argues, must be a great liar and deceiver, since people are simple and easily fooled by appearances. A deceiver will never lack victims. A ruler who always keeps his word, even when it hurts him, isn't honorable. He's a fool. Promises are a political currency, to be used and, when needed, ignored. The trick is to maintain the appearance of faithfulness. A ruler should not be seen as a liar, even while he's lying. This is the art of the fox. Machiavelli famously said a ruler must learn to imitate two animals, the lion and the fox. The lion is powerful and can scare off wolves, but he's helpless against traps. The fox is cunning and can spot traps, but he can't fight off wolves. A ruler must be both. He needs the lion's ferocity to crush his enemies, but also the fox's cunning to navigate the treacherous world of politics. Think about modern international relations. Nations sign treaties and make public declarations of friendship while spying on each other and jockeying for a strategic advantage. The public statement is the ruler appearing to be faithful. The espionage is the action of the fox, recognizing that the world is a landscape of traps. To master this rule is to understand that power has its own brutal logic. An act of cruelty is an investment. If it buys you long-term stability, then in Machiavelli's world, it was a price worth paying. Rule for the economy of power, be feared, not hated. The fourth rule refines these principles into a masterclass on managing your reputation. It's a delicate balancing act with one simple goal. Be feared, but do everything you can to avoid being hated. That distinction is the razor's edge a ruler lives on. Fear keeps people obedient. Hatred makes them desperate to rebel. Machiavelli is crystal clear on this point. A ruler can survive conspiracies and enemies as long as he isn't hated by the people. The moment the public despises him, he's lost. Every citizen becomes a potential assassin. So, where is the line between healthy fear and deadly hatred? Machiavelli says a ruler becomes hated when he is rapacious and a usurper of the property and the women of his subjects. Above all else, keep your hands off their stuff and their honor. As he bluntly puts it, men forget more easily the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony. This is a profound insight into human psychology. You can execute a rival, and people may eventually accept it. But if you start confiscating their land, their money, their homes, you create a wound that never heals. That resentment will fester until it erupts into revolt. Fear is a response to power. It's impersonal. Hatred is a response to personal injury. It's intimate and unforgiving. This principle directly feeds his counterintuitive advice on generosity. Normally, we think of generosity as a great quality in a leader. Machiavelli sees it as a trap. There is nothing so self-defeating as generosity. Here's why. To be seen as truly generous, a ruler has to be lavish with his spending. This requires huge sums of money. If he uses his own, he'll soon be broke. If he uses his subjects' money, he has to tax them heavily. This starts a downward spiral. The heavy taxes make him hated by the many, while his lavish spending only benefits a few. He's made himself poor, weakened his state, and earned the hatred of his people all, to get a reputation for being generous. Even worse, when the money runs out and he can't be generous anymore, he'll be branded a miser, and the same people who praised him will turn on him. So, the wise ruler shouldn't mind being called a miser. By being frugal with public money, he keeps the state's resources ready for defense and for important projects, all without burdening his people with taxes. Over time, people will see that his so-called stinginess actually protects them from financial ruin. They'll come to see his frugality as the truest form of generosity. You can see this playing out in governments and businesses all the time. Politicians who promise extravagant programs without a plan to pay for them might win short-term popularity, but they eventually lead the state toward bankruptcy and have to impose crushing taxes, earning long-term hatred. The fiscally irresponsible leader who makes tough, unpopular cuts may be called a miser, but they ensure the long-term economic health of their nation or company. The economy of power is about understanding what people truly care about, their security and their property. A leader who guarantees this, even if he's tough, will be tolerated and even respected. The fear he inspires is a stable, predictable power. But a leader who threatens that security through greed or bad management will be a Ted. And the hatred of the people is one force that no fortress can withstand. Rule 5, be the fox and the lion. Adaptability is survival. The final rule ties all the others together. You must be relentlessly adaptable. The world is always changing, and a leader who is rigid, who relies on only one strategy, is doomed. To survive, Machiavelli insists, a leader must have a mind that can turn itself according to the winds of fortune and the variations of things. This is the ultimate synthesis of strength and cunning, captured in his famous metaphor. The prince must be both a lion and a fox. As we've touched on, this duality is essential. The lion represents raw strength and overwhelming force. A leader has to act like a lion to crush opposition and intimidate enemies. But strength alone is clumsy. The lion, for all its might, can't see a trap. That's why the leader must also be a fox. The fox is a master of cunning and deception. It spots the traps. It navigates complex situations with subtlety. The fox represents your strategic intellect, ability to negotiate, manipulate, and see hidden threats. A leader who is only a lion will charge straight into a snare. A leader who is only a fox will get torn apart by wolves. You need the lion's strength to make your threats credible and the fox's brain to know when and when not to use it. This adaptability goes beyond just strength and cunning. A leader must know when to be bold and when to be cautious. Machiavelli notes that some men succeed through caution, others through sheer force of will. Both can work if their method matches the times, but if the times change and they don't adapt their approach, they're finished. The cautious man who suddenly needs to act boldly will hesitate and lose. The impulsive man who needs to be patient will blunder and fail. The truly great leader isn't one or the other. They can be either, depending on what the situation demands. In that same spirit, Machiavelli warns against staying neutral. In a fight between two of your neighbors, the leader who tries to stay on the sidelines will almost always become the victim of the winner. By refusing to take a side, you alienate both. It's always wiser, he argues, to enter the fight and pick a side. If your ally wins, you share the rewards. If your ally loses, they still feel a bond with you for your support. A decisive choice, even a losing one, is better than the indecision of neutrality, which just guarantees you'll be someone's victim later. This is more relevant today than ever. In business, entire industries get wiped out by new technology. The lion companies, the established leaders with huge resources, often fail because they're too slow. They rely on their old strength and get caught in the trap of innovation. The successful companies are the ones that combine the lion's resources with the fox's agility. Blockbuster was a lion. Netflix was a fox that grew into a lion. To master this adaptability, Machiavelli gives one final piece of advice. A leader must be a student of history and war. Read about great leaders. Study their campaigns. Figure out why they won and why they lost, so you can imitate the first and avoid the second. History is a laboratory of power. The patterns are all there to be studied. A leader who ignores history is like a general going into battle without ever studying strategy. He's relying on luck, and he'll be destroyed by an opponent who has done their homework. Your survival depends on this ultimate flexibility. You can't be bound by ideology, a fixed personality, or old methods. You have to be a pragmatist. You must look at every situation with cold, clear eyes, and ask one question. What is required to win? The answer might be the lion's roar or the fox's whisper. The master of power doesn't have a favorite tool. They have a toolbox, and they know how to use every instrument in it. We've just walked through the cold, hard calculus of Machiavellian power. From the self-made strength of Vertog to the cunning of the fox and the lion. These 5 rules are a blueprint for survival in any competitive field. They aren't comfortable, but they are powerful. If you find these strategies compelling and want to keep learning the unwritten rules that govern our world, then subscribe to this channel and like this video. We'll keep dissecting the minds of the world's greatest strategists to give you the intellectual weapons you need. So, what's the takeaway from our trip into Machiavelli's world? First, forge your own fortune through rely on your own skill, because power that's given to you can always be taken away. Second, be a realist. See people for what they are, self-interested, and fickle, and act accordingly. Third, use cruelty and deceit like a surgeon's scalpel, decisively, precisely, and only when necessary. Fourth, master the economy of power. Be feared, but never hated. And remember that being stingy is often the most generous thing you can do. And fifth, be adaptable. Be both the lion and the fox, strong and cunning, ready to change your nature to fit the times. Machiavelli didn't write a guide on how to be a good person. He wrote a guide on how to be an effective ruler. He believed the chaos that came from weak, idealistic leaders caused far more suffering than the calculated actions of a strong one. His work is a chilling but powerful reminder that the world of power operates on its own set of laws. As you go back into your own world, your office, your ambitions start to look for these patterns. You'll see them everywhere. You'll see the lions and the foxes, the idealists who fail and the pragmatists who succeed. Machiavelli's ultimate lesson isn't an invitation to become a tyrant. It's a challenge to open your eyes to the real truth of power, so you're never its victim again. What you do with that knowledge is up to you.